Hola a todos, gracias por asistir a la sesión con la Universidad de Warwick. En nuestra oficina está el Dr. Stephen Soanes y nos va a dar una presentación acerca de hacer su PhD en la universidad. Nosotros somos Inova y cualquier duda que lleguen a tener la pueden hacer al final. Les agradecemos puedan escribirlo en el chat y si tienen algún problema con el sonido nos pueden dejar saber también por medio del chat. Muchas gracias.
Hello everyone. As you've heard there, my name is Stephen Soanes. I have studied a PhD at Warwick, so I have been through the application process before. And this webinar is designed to give you an introduction to both life at Warwick as a PhD student, but also to the process of applying for funding and to applications as well. The process for PhDs is a little bit more complicated than for bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. It does depend on which department you're applying to. It depends which funding scholarship you're looking to apply to as well, as to how it will work exactly. And hopefully this webinar will demystify the process. So some of you here today will be at a very early stage, just considering PhDs, looking at options, maybe wondering whether you actually want to do doctoral research. It is a big undertaking. It will be 3 to 4 years of your life, potentially 3 to 4 years of the most rewarding years you will ever have in your life, if you choose the right topic, if you have a good supervisor, if you get inspired by your research. But it does pay to think first and make certain that PhD research is right for you. Others today will be actively planning to start next year. If that's you, I will have some advice and some top tips to make certain you have a checklist to use. Others of you may be looking to apply very soon. There are rolling deadlines taking place for some of our departments, particularly for engineering, for WMG, for say medical school. And in these cases, the application process is a little bit different. It's a little bit more like a job application. And I'll be talking through both types of applications. So whatever stage you're at, if you're just beginning, if you're just ready to submit, I'm going to be talking through both the process of applying with a research proposal. That is one that you come up with yourself, or more like a job application for a predefined project. So this is our agenda for today. I'm going to start next by looking at PhDs specifically at the University of Warwick in the UK, telling you a little bit about what makes Warwick special as a place for research, looking at some of our research specialisms, looking at our campus, accommodation options, and the broader context of life as a PhD student with us. After that, I'm going to turn to look at funding. And there are many types of funding available. It may not appear so when you first start out. Your options may look limited, but if you do enough digging, if you do enough investigation as a good and diligent researcher, you can often find funding suitable for you. I'm then going to look at what our academics have got to say about getting a PhD offer. I've asked academics at Warwick, including directors of research and course selectors, to ask them what common mistakes PhD applicants make. So as part of this webinar, I would like to share with you some of their advice, some of their top tips to avoid the pitfalls, to avoid having your application put in the slush pile, and to make certain that you are successful with all the work you'll have put into putting together your research proposal and your application. To close, I then have 10 top tips in a single slide. These are to give you in one place some of the main tips to be aware of when you're applying to ensure success with your application. Okay, so looking at the numbers, universities always love numbers and we're no different. So we have some of them here for you today. Warwick is a Russell Group university, so we're quite similar to the Ivy League in the US. These are some of the top research-intensive universities in the UK. And typically speaking, research universities that are part of the Russell Group will have greater facilities, they will have a larger investment in terms of scholarship provision, in terms of laboratories, in terms of library facilities, and specialist data sets. These rankings show you a little bit about where we stand in the wider world. Now, last week we went up in one of these rankings, the Times Higher Education World Ranking 2 years ago. We were 14 places lower than this. So we went up 12 places last year. This year we've gone up another 2 places. We're 62nd in the world in the QS rankings. We're top 10 in the Guardian. And in the last Research Excellence Framework, which measures research quality in the UK, we finished 7th. So very much in the top 10% of research-intensive universities. Some things that make Warwick a little bit different include just how international we are. A full 41% of our students are international, and a large part of those will be postgraduates. So you will be sharing a campus with researchers from all across the globe. We often get researchers from Mexico, so you'll be in good company with other Mexicans, many others from Latin America more widely, but also across a much broader range of countries than just that. Depending on your research, that might help you. You may be meeting people with different cultural perspectives, different business insights, potentially people who've worked in the wider world, so that international reputation can serve your research project well. Finally, in that Research Excellence Framework from 2014, nearly 90% of all of our research was counted as being in the very top tier of world-leading or internationally excellent investigation. So the academics you'll be meeting at Warwick will be at the forefront of their game. They're not just reading the best research, they're not just digesting it and synthesizing it, they are themselves writing that research, and you can tap into that directly as a Warwick PhD. People don't always know where we are, so this is a map just to give you a bit of a sense of where in the UK you can find us. We are in the south of the UK, very much in the middle of southern England, right in the centre point of southern England, between the 2 biggest cities. So between Birmingham, which is just 20 minutes away, that's the 2nd largest city in the UK, and London, which is just 1 hour away by train. So you can get to central London. For myself, I could use the facilities such as the British Library, the Wellcome Library, right on your doorstep at Euston Station, very close by. We have a lot else around us as well. So if you like Shakespeare, we have Stratford-upon-Avon. If you want to travel more widely, we have Birmingham International Airport, which travels across a very broad area of the world to help you with your research. And we're very close to the Cotswolds, not too far away from Wales, to the Peak District, direct train to the Lake District. So you can explore England while you're with us. You know, you're right in the middle of things. It's easy to get to most places. This is our campus as seen from the air. Looking at your screen there, you will hopefully see on the left a city. We're not far away from quite a big city, and that's the city of Coventry. What you will also see is how green it is. You see lots of trees, open countryside in the distance. And we are on the edge of this city, so you have the best of both. You have access to good transport links, all of the culture that being in Coventry will bring you. Coventry in 2021 is about to be the UK's capital of culture, with millions of pounds of investment coming in, and you can access this right on your doorstep. But equally, if you want to get out into the countryside and explore the real heart of rural England, that's right there as well for you to walk into and explore. Some key words for Warwick: we are young. Compare us to Oxford or Cambridge, they are nearly 10 times older than us. In fact, more than that, considerably older than that even. They're perhaps 1,000 years old, getting on for. We're just 50 years old. We're a very young university, as I say, and that links us to business. We are a very entrepreneurial university. In the bottom left of your shot, you'll see a science park with a number of different companies based right in the middle of our campus. We have the National Automotive Innovation Centre right in the middle of campus. Jaguar Land Rover, Tata Motors, Tata Steel, all part of our campus. I keep using the word campus, and that's very much a defining factor of being a Warwick PhD. You know, it's all in one place. Everything you need will be on your doorstep. And what you're looking at there is the vast majority of our university. We're not spread out across multiple sites. You don't have to travel to reach other academics and other researchers. You will be sharing a single community space with those PhDs. I've already mentioned how international we are, and we use that to our advantage, both in terms of our very international academic staff who can bring additional expertise. So we're not just about the UK, we're not just about local contexts. We're linking into world literature, world history, international business, international management, international trade and strategy, and a number of different areas. I mentioned about the Russell Group and how research-led we are. And we're also very flexible. You know, we're young as a university. We're not rigidly rooted in the past. We're not a traditional university in that sense. So we've been able to set up new courses, new agile types of research that mean that you can click into and link into some of the latest research developments that are going on. We're constantly developing new doctoral research partnerships. You'll see doctoral training centres constantly adapting and developing to the needs around us. And you can take part in some of this as a researcher. Okay, so campus. Why would you come to a campus? Why would you not go to the heart of a big city? There are different places and different universities for different folks. So for some of you, maybe you are looking at cities, and that's fair enough. Cities bring a whole host of different advantages. Campuses, though, are a good space to be a researcher. Now, this is number one, the intellectual networks that you can form in a campus. Very often in the city university, you will find buildings are spread out. You go into one building and you stay there. Whereas with a campus, there are spaces that are set up for collaborative, multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research. One of those here is the Wilson Research Exchange that you can see in the middle of your shot, that are designed to break you out of orthodoxy, to break you out of traditional thinking. If you work in business, you'll know potentially how useful it can be to develop insights in a whole host of different fields, whether that's modern languages and cultures, applied linguistics, and professional communication, excuse me, professional education across borders, potentially history, learning the lessons of history. So you can connect into seminars, you can connect into research networks, workshops, conferences that are happening right in the middle of campus that are 5 minutes from where you're being taught or supervised, where you'll be researching, and you can be part of a rich, diverse, and open-minded research network. Because we're a campus, we have these dedicated research spaces available to everybody that are easily accessible. So Wilson Research Exchange is a prime example. It's a dedicated space for PhD researchers where you can go and you can work, study, host your own workshops and your own events, invite academics from other universities, not just Warwick, and continue to develop your studies. Campus is undeniably convenient. You'll be 15 minutes at most from the vast majority of things you'll ever need to get to. You're not losing time. You're not having to travel across big distances. The library, your research, resources, facilities, laboratories, academics, they're all very much in one place. You've seen how green it is. It's nice, that's nice. But beyond that, it can be a good place to unwind when you're finding you're struggling with an intellectual challenge. So beyond just being pleasant, having a green space where you can sit by a lake, where you can go for a walk in a wood, where you can take advantage of the running routes on campus, means you can do some thinking beyond just sitting in an office or sitting in the library and agonizing over a problem. By switching off, you can actually find yourself switching on to that problem and unknotting that thorny issue through not trying too hard to think and just letting your mind do the thinking for you. Finally, and I would say equally importantly, is the aspect of community that a campus brings. Being a PhD researcher, depending on your department, can be a lonely enterprise. You may find you're doing work a lot of the time on your own. It's an individual research project. It's a unique contribution to knowledge that you'll be making. And that is exciting. You know, this is something that you will own forever. This will be a piece of research that nobody has ever done before. But you also want to connect potentially to friends, to colleagues, and to be in a space where you can feel at home in the fullest sense of the word. And a campus can bring you that. You know, with the Arts Centre, with the SU, with all these research events, drinks, dinners, socials, that can keep life exciting, fresh and enjoyable, not just in terms of the intellectual enterprise, but also in terms of getting out there and living a full life. Warwick as a campus has support for everyone in many different ways. Apologies that the text is quite small, but I've had to try to fit everything onto one slide. This isn't everything, this is as much as I could fit in. I hope you can still read it. Hopefully some of the more important things that we offer in terms of support. All the way through from your welcome week, where you get to settle in, you get to explore campus, you get to find out where the library is, get involved with some of the clubs, the sports, the socials, these sorts of things, and get your bearings. That's number one on the list, right through to that last point on the list here, to do with your careers, to do with getting an academic job potentially, or taking your research into into business. It might be that you want to apply your research in a broader context. You might want to work in the third sector. You might want to work in government. You might want to be an advisor, a consultant. The career service is there for everybody, regardless of your department, and they can help you find the right job for you, which could be an academic of an Ivy League university or a Russell Group university, or it might be setting up your own business or being an entrepreneur and using your research skills in a startup of one person. So these sorts of facilities are there, and you'll see there's a broad range for all aspects of your life, whether that's your accommodation and settling in, whether it's the arts centre, music, sports, for having a good time and enjoying yourself, whether it's the health centre, well-being, chaplaincy, if you ever find you need someone to talk to, right the way through to things like estates and security services that make sure that our campuses are safe, protected, student-focused community space. This is our campus, so this shows you a little bit of what it actually looks like on the ground. We have 8 different lakes in the 700 or so acres of our campus. You're looking across at some of the accommodation you can get. This is postgraduate accommodation you're looking at here. Accommodation right on our campus that you can apply for. Not everybody gets campus accommodation. It is competitive, but if you apply before the 31st of July every year, you'll be put into a ballot and considered for accommodation. And as an overseas student coming from Mexico, you'll be prioritised over local applicants. You've travelled further. We know that you may have more to consider in terms of settling in, so we will prioritise your application for university accommodation. Equally, Warwick has got one of the largest amounts of off-campus accommodation in the UK. We have thousands of rooms off-campus that the university manages. And again, these are maintained to a high standard, so that if you apply for this accommodation, you can be certain you're going to have properly checked facilities that are going to be equivalent to what you would find on campus. All of this accommodation is linked to a local bus route, so you won't have to change. It will be a direct bus to campus. You can share with other researchers. You may perhaps be familiar with living in a city or a town and prefer that, so this is an option for some people that you may prefer. Now, looking more specifically at the research you can do at Warwick, these are some of the research areas that we are particularly focusing on. It is not everything. We are currently refreshing our research priorities at Warwick, our interdisciplinary research areas, and these are the ones that are already up and running and have been actually for several years. Some, like connecting cultures, spread right across the humanities and the social sciences. So you may find history or cultural policy studies or modern languages, but also sociology, politics, business, even economics. These sorts of subjects will fit under these sorts of umbrellas. We have lots of focus on sustainability from all sorts of perspectives. the scientific, looking at energy, looking at food security, right the way through to how consumers and people behave in a disposable economy. You know, how does the human brain work? That links in with our behavioral science, behavior, brain and society, GRP. So these just give you a sense of the sorts of things that Warwick particularly focuses on. This morning, I had a look through to see what other research areas we have, and to try and characterize the sorts of things that Warwick particularly focuses on. Again, apologies for the small text, but you will see here lots and lots of different research areas that Warwick particularly excels at across a huge number of areas. We don't do everything, so these will fit within clusters, but you will see right the way across business, economics, sciences, a whole host of different areas. So just looking at these and giving you a sense there of what it is we do, you will see particular areas such as finance and financial economics as very large areas for Warwick. We've regularly been in the top 20 in the world for these in recent years. Accountancy and international business, operations management and HR, econometrics, strategization around how businesses operate, and then linking across to subjects, say in economics and say in psychology, such as behavioral science, where we're looking at how the human brain works. We're looking at how people act, how they justify things to themselves but actually behave differently. Why do they do that? What's human behavior based upon? This in turn links to other areas such as sustainable development, potentially entrepreneurship if you're looking to plug into setting up a business and how you can sell a product to somebody, and how people act. Same with social justice and criminology. So across a diverse number of areas, you'll find connections and linkages. You may think that your subject sits very neatly in a certain department, but equally you may find that your particular subject area has lots of connections with other areas. You know, you might not expect to find a link to history or to English or to life sciences or to business, philosophy, but in actual fact, you may find your research ultimately has these connections. The difficulty really then is finding your particular PhD supervisor, finding your particular PhD area, and as a researcher, you're going to need to do some of the legwork in terms of finding the niche that is right for your particular interests. Looking at funding, funders are going to be considering these same questions. They're going to be looking for the match between you as a person and the skills that you bring, the expertise you already hold, and also the university you're applying to, the research project you're proposing. It all needs to stack up so that the person, the project, and the university connect together and it all makes sense. So you're going to need to look at your research interests, align those to Warwick, and then put together a research proposal that is coherent and that makes sense. Looking at funding sources, the main place to start, I would say, would be the graduate school at Warwick. There's a handy link here to many of the different types of scholarships that we offer at Warwick. You can filter this by your particular faculty, whether that's arts and humanities, social sciences, engineering, science and medicine. You can also filter according to your fee status. So as a Mexican applicant, you can put overseas fee status, and that will filter down and zoom in on those particular scholarships that are available to you and that you can apply for. Just a health warning, a little word of caution. Never treat a single source as authoritative. It's good advice generally as a researcher. You always need to fact check and look more widely, check your references. It's the same when you're looking for scholarships, because you often find that academic departments will actually advertise their own local scholarships that you may be eligible for, but not advertise it on the graduate school pages. So do check a wider range of sources to broaden your opportunities. I would say it's worth talking to staff. You know, if you're in a university at the moment, or you have connections with academics in your field, it never hurts to ask them about funding, because there may be new research projects coming up. They may be aware of strategic research enterprises that are about to take off with different consortia of universities. Warwick may well be part of those, and they may be able to tell you about forthcoming and nascent research that you can tap into. There are third-party listings. Jobs.ac.uk is one that Warwick actually set up a number of years ago and is now UK-wide. If you look for PhDs on there, you will find a number of advertised positions. The same with Find a PhD in the UK. They often advertise PhDs that may, again, not be available elsewhere. They may just pop up. They may get filled quickly and then disappear. So it always pays to keep checking these sources, to keep revisiting, just to make certain you don't miss anything. You may find charities have funding available. There are books within the UK and there are websites that host this sort of information. It may be small amounts of money, but it may also be a contribution towards your overall costs for things like research travel, for hosting symposia and conferences, for books or particular materials that you may need to do your research. Same with companies, and of course country sponsorship is an excellent way of making certain that you can get scholarships as a Mexican citizen. Looking across the main university-wide awards, at Warwick we have a particular award, the Chancellor Scholarship, which is quite generous. It offers 3.5 years of full funding to include your living costs within the maintenance grant, which you can put towards things like accommodation, food, bills, anything you want really, you know, holidays and the rest. And then also tuition fees, fully covered as an international student. There are, as I mentioned, a number of tuition fee awards and other awards available for Mexican students in particular. And you can talk to Inova about these. Inova are the experts in these sorts of areas. Then you have academic departments, as I've mentioned, which often make awards available for overseas applicants. And then also structural development awards, such as the Newton PhD scholarships that were set up in 2014. These will keep changing. It's worth checking to see what's available to you at this point in time. But there are a number of different places to look. Just looking back to last year, you will see 2019, not 2020 here. That is for a reason. That is because most of these departments haven't yet announced when their scholarship deadlines will be. However, you will see that these deadlines come up quite quickly. So if we reason that actually the deadlines might be similar next year, 2020 entry, they could be coming up as soon as January. You may only have 4 or so months to get your applications together, and there's lots to do. And we'll come on to how you can manage that best, how you can make the best use of your time, potentially as busy people who are already working or already studying. I appreciate you may have lots to do. Some of these are quite easy to apply for. Some of them are automatic. So you can apply for a PhD and actually you will be automatically considered for these awards if you tick the right box on your Warwick application. In other cases, you're going to need to write a separate justification, statement of purpose, which will be used to narrow down the successful applicants, and they will be based on merit. Looking towards the sciences, again, there are a number of awards available. These should generally be for overseas applicants. It may change year to year. They may not all be, so apologies if 1 or 2 of these are specifically for Europe. I did check through them and hopefully they should all be for overseas applicants. Some of them, such as the fewer international scholarship in artificial intelligence, are structurally significant awards that the university offers, and we're looking for the best talent regardless of where that person comes from. So that's particularly for overseas applicants. Other departments like WMG have awards specifically for students from Mexico and other countries like that. Life sciences are the same, looking to target the best students from particular regions. And I've already mentioned medical school and engineering, physics, these sorts of departments that have rolling awards that are a little bit more like job applications, where they will keep popping up throughout the year. If you see the right scholarship that fits your interests, you can send a CV, you can talk to the project lead and potentially apply for these. And I'll talk about this in just a moment. Starting off first though with the PACE PhD studentship from last year, just as an example of what an application actually looks like. In this case, you apply to the university separately, but then also need to submit a separate 1,000-word statement that focuses on you, your project, and the potential impact you could have. We've already looked at the global research priorities and that interdisciplinary research, if you remember those different boxes, such as cybersecurity, energy, these sorts of particular research areas that we look at Warwick. You will see at point 7 here, we're asking for research clusters. And this is where you're trying to position yourself as the ideal candidate, not just for your field, but for your field within Warwick. So you're looking to connect your interests to the interests that Warwick already has. And if you can convince us that you share our academics' particular research expertise and interests, you're going to be at a much greater advantage getting one of these particular scholarships. Those parts in blue are those that you can control. So they're things that you can write, they're particular pieces of text that you can use to convince us. Those in red are those that are to some extent outside your control. Of course, you can pick your scholarship references, but these will be independently written. You can't necessarily say what's going to be put into those. And the same with your academic transcripts. These are your grades, these are your marks that exist. You can't generally do much about that. But if you make a convincing statement, much in the way that you'll write a convincing research proposal, this can go a long way to securing both funding and academic buy-in for your particular research project and ensure that you get the greatest chance of getting all the support you need to start at Warwick. This is the Artificial Intelligence Award that I've just mentioned, and you will see here in red that this one is open to international applicants. You need to just watch here how much of the fees get paid. So this is, in this case, all the fees, including for international students as well. You'll also see that there is a stipend. There are lots of words that get used here. Stipend means the same as maintenance grant, the same as living costs, really. So when you see stipend, what that is saying is that's your own money to spend as you want to spend it. The UK Research Council increases its award every year. We don't quite know what that's going to be, but we would expect it to be somewhere in the region of £15,000 to £16,000 UK currency. This is tax-free, so essentially you could add another third to that if you were working. You pay no tax on that whatsoever. So it can be a little bit more than some people may expect. Again, looking down the bottom, you can control your CV, you can control your research proposal and statement of purpose. You can't control your transcripts and your certificates of previous degrees. So do pay attention to the areas where you have control. There is a distinction to be made between the research proposal, which is purely focused on the academic outcomes and methodologies of your particular project. It's purely academic. And your statement of purpose, which is more about positioning you as a candidate for a PhD studentship and making us understand why it is you are the right person to be taking that PhD studentship and running with it, why you are the best person to answer the questions that you set out in your research proposal. This is a little bit of a different type of project. What you will see at the top is this particular example is only open to UK and EU students. It isn't the case that all of these are available just to UK and EU students, but it is the case that the majority of them are. So there may be slightly fewer of these available. Nevertheless, it is worth searching because you could find your perfect project has already been written for you. Medical school currently has one available that is open for overseas students, for example. And if that's your particular area of interest, it will save you having to write a research proposal. It will save you having to do any of this work because your academic has already done it for you. What your academic is looking for is the right person. So they're looking for the perfect candidate for this particular PhD project. It is therefore important that you understand fully the project description and that you can say that you have the expertise already required to at least start this project. Of course, there's no expectation that you're going to be fully versed in every aspect of nanoscale electrochemistry in this case, but you may have worked within chemistry before, you may have taken relevant modules, you may have done a master's already, although it's less expected within the sciences that you necessarily need a master's. You may be able to apply directly with undergraduate degree. The one thing I really would say is that right down the bottom here, Dr. Paul Wilson has very helpfully given you his email address. Do write to that person. Do prepare to write to them. Don't just do it immediately. Don't do it on a whim. Make certain that you have substance, that you've fully considered the project, that you've drawn together your own research ideas, you've started to draft your CV, so that you can have an intelligent, collaborative discussion about how you could be involved with this project before you apply. Of course, your application will be independently considered, but it will be, much as it would be with a job application, considered in your favour if you've already made an approach, if you've taken the time to consider the project first, so that you have already started that process of connecting with your academic. Okay, moving on now to who gets a university PhD offer at the University of Warwick. And this is where I hand over to some of my academic colleagues. I'm going to do the talking on their behalf, but they have very kindly given me some of their words and some of their top tips for the ways to avoid the pitfalls that PhD applicants sometimes fall into, and also some of the things that you can proactively do to ensure the greatest chance of success. These are the essentials. There are three things, first of all, to bear in mind. The very first hurdle you will come to is whether or not you are already fully qualified. For some departments, such as economics, finance and business school, you may need a first-class degree equivalent. So you're looking at over and above 8.5, potentially 9.0 in Mexico. In other cases, departments won't be looking so much for, that absolute top-notch academic achievement. What they're looking for is your research ability. So some other departments are looking more at how you can formulate a problem. They're looking for genuine problem solvers, for those who have a track record of potentially a dissertation when you've done particularly well, of looking at a problem, of systematically working through that problem, defining a methodology, defining your sources, defining your interrogative approach, and then actually coming out with some answers. So some people are looking more for the person, some people are looking more for the academic track record. Either way, do make certain that you are qualified. In most cases in the UK and at Warwick, you will need to have your own research idea. As we've just discussed, and just to recap on what we've already said, most people applying from Mexico to Warwick will formulate a research proposal. If you're lucky, you may find some of these projects already written for you, but in most cases, you'll be doing the writing. So it's important that you look at your specific subject area and make certain that you understand what they are looking for. In some cases, say WMG as an example, for areas such as steels research and materials research, for cybersecurity and these sorts of areas, there is a form, an inquiry form you fill out online that gives you the boxes that you need to fill out that WMG are particularly looking for. In contrast, if you look at politics or maybe law, you are generally going to be required to submit a fairly meaty, weighty piece of research preparation to that department, to have thought through your research proposal in advance, and to come with some fairly concrete ideas about how you want to go about researching. And finally, last but by no means least, do think about your potential and prospective supervisors, and do involve them before you start to apply. I have one message for you today, and that is find a supervisor and involve them. Because if you do that, all of the slightly mysterious, slightly ambiguous areas of, how do I apply? Where do I find funding? What should my research priority be? What might my methodology be? All of these sorts of questions can be answered by having an adult discussion with your potential supervisor, who generally speaking will be very happy to talk to you and advise you on what they think might be the most promising lines of inquiry for a PhD project. Professor Brian Thomas works in life sciences, and he's been the director of the Midlands Integrated Biosciences Training Partnership. He has said very much the same thing. Don't take a reactive approach to applications. In areas in the sciences, including life sciences, we talked about physics, we've talked about WMG, we talked about engineering and medicine, but particularly as well for areas like life sciences. If there is a job application there, if there is a job advert out, be proactive and write to that person. Talk to them. Don't just put in a blind application, but actually approach them as potentially a collaborator on their research project, show an interest, ask them questions, and by virtue of that, stand a greater chance of succeeding with your application. Again, don't wait until a PhD application deadline to start collaborating. Don't wait until you actually start your PhD itself. What you actually want to do here is follow academic department guidance and talk to them. So politics is very different to life sciences. Ed here is in a very different field to Brian. They work in very different ways. Very often you'll be working more independently in politics. But that doesn't mean that you need to write independently. You don't need to be doing this on your own. Get a permanent member of staff involved at an early stage, and then put their name on the application form. There are few better endorsements for your application than to have an academic already signed up and willing to collaborate with you. So if you've got their buy-in, if Ed, for example, has said he likes the idea of your project and would be interested in getting involved, the rest of the politics department is likely to follow that lead and say yes to your application. Never also assume that your CV speaks for itself. Academics actively invite you to talk to them, but you will know as an ex-student or a current student, they are very, very busy people. Your expertise may not be transparent, so be very clear about why what you want to do links to that project, and demonstrate that you are the right person. So Stephanie is the program leader for applied linguistics, working in areas such as intercultural communication, discourse analysis, these sorts of areas. Stephanie's advice here very much is explain, as you would have done with a personal statement for an undergraduate degree or a master's degree. Extrapolate, draw out the evidence that you want to mobilize, and be very overt about why you are the right person. Professor Nick Lee works at Warwick Business School, and his advice is not to be too safe or too ambitious with your project proposal. This is the Goldilocks question, how to get your porridge just right. You don't want to go too hot, you don't want to promise the world, but you don't want to go too cold and be too safe, because if you're being too context specific, this is what Nick was talking about in his email to me, the academic may say, well, yes, fine, but what's the point? Why do I care about this? Why does your research that looks at a very small part of a particular business area in a particular country matter to me as an international business expert? Equally, you don't want to say, I can promise to solve climate change through my one piece of research. It'd be amazing if you could, but I doubt it's possible. So really try and find a phenomenon or a project, this is to use Nick's words here, that can tell us something bigger. So something manageable, something you can focus on, but like a telescope, it's something you can hold in your grasp, but can show you other worlds. It can tell you something much bigger about our world, or if you're a physicist, potentially worlds outside our own with astrophysics. Elizabeth is wonderfully friendly. She is very approachable in psychology. I've had many very fruitful discussions with Elizabeth before. She welcomes casual discussions and casual chats. But if this is your first time contacting an academic, impressions do matter. They'll be looking to see a seriousness of intent in your approach. So make certain that you spend that time on introductions to prospective supervisors. You may talk to current academics at your current university or those that you have connections with already. And when you are approaching your new academic for the very first time, do consider attaching some sort of research proposal, even if it's just a bullet point list, even if it's just a few suggestions. Again, looking for that Goldilocks zone. We don't want to overload the academic with 50 pages of densely worded text that they can't possibly hope to read. Quarter of a paragraph that just says, I'm interested in behavioral economics, probably wouldn't go down very well either. So, you know, somewhere in the sort of 2 to 3 page area. Use highlighting, use bold text, use whatever you can to make it digestible and easy to understand for your academic. Finally, looking at the common mistakes and how you can avoid them, we have Professor Martin Wills from chemistry. He's been head of department in recent years. And he's focusing less on the research that you're proposing in and of itself than how it can apply to the research environment you're applying to. So, for example, if you are a specialist in the history of 20th century pop music, Warwick probably isn't your place. There are other universities in the UK that are very good at that. Make certain that you understand what you're letting yourself in for and what Warwick is going to be best at to support you in. I actually had this from more than just Martin. Other academics wrote back, and I haven't included them all. Do make certain you understand what your academic's expertise is in. I had one academic who said he was approached because he was supposed to be an expert in agrarian reforms in Nepal. He's not. He was quite surprised to receive that email. And it doesn't look very good if you don't know who your academic is. So do understand what they're interested in and be clever about it. Think about networking, think about appealing to their interests by connecting your interests to their own. Okay, so going back to all of these, do your homework, do your research, look at what Warwick is good at, make certain that we are the university for you. Be aware that this doesn't show all of the areas that we look at. You'll see how difficult it is to find really a needle in a haystack sometimes. As I've already said, if you find the right supervisor who does work in an aligned area, they can help you. So they may have another colleague in your department who they'll be happy to refer you to. But there are other sources online from the comfort of your own sofa that you can start to explore, such as research pages, often tucked away in a separate tab to those that you'll be familiar with as a student at your university. Most Warwick departments will have a research tab for every single academic department, where you can look at the sorts of areas we focus on. There are 5 for life sciences, for example. There's a checkbox list for politics, for law, also for business. And you can start to filter down the academics that share your particular expertise and research passions. We have the experts directory, which is not infallible. So again, don't use it as a one-stop shop. I will show you that in a moment. But it does give you keyword searchable access to some academics at least that may be working in your area. So if you put in things like global development or international development, finance, neuroscience, it could be to do with intercultural communication, the Caribbean, Latin America, these sorts of things. They will bring up a whole host of different academics each time you search. Have a look again, a bit like with those job applications you saw for PhD project posts. Have a look for contacts, for email addresses, research coordinators, directors of research, forms you can fill out. Having done your homework, just to reiterate, do make certain that you don't do this cold. Be prepared to have a proper academic, intellectual conversation about what you want to get out of your PhD. But do use these as well at a relatively early stage when you've started to get your ideas together, just so you can explore the feasibility of what you're proposing, because there's nothing worse than spending days and days putting a research project together, only if you're academic to tell you it's already been done. Don't do that because I've written it. You may find actually you can save yourself time by engaging in conversation early. This is the experts directory, and this is just an example looking at development. What you will see here is it brings up quite a lot of different types of development. So you've got classical international development topics in areas such as law, history, politics, employment research to some extent. But you've also got one here in philosophy to do with cognitive development, to do with the mind. You may find also in psychology, applied linguistics, these same sorts of keywords will come up further down that list. So use this as a signpost, but don't set off down the road just by looking at this signpost. Look at others as well to make certain you've explored more fully the different academics you could approach, and start to shortlist for yourself who you might like to work with. You may find someone, when you click on their name, click on the department and go through to more information, you may find someone there that shares 90% of your interests and would make a perfect supervisor for you. Equally, you may find someone who looks there or thereabouts. They have some sort of interest in your sort of country area, your geographical area, your research theme, but actually they don't share everything that you're interested in. So just shortlist them and then start to filter it down. And then look at these department staff pages to do more fact checking and to explore in more detail and depth. When you do that, if you come through for international development, this is one of the old global research priorities. It's been a structurally important area for Warwick for decades now. And you will see there is more detail here. So looking through the GRPs, through those interdisciplinary research topics, you'll find a very wide diversity of academics working in my old department of history, such as David Anderson down the bottom there, right the way through the sciences, the social sciences, a number of different areas. So you'll see here, as a campus, how one topic, international development, can link you to a whole host of other academics. It is important to choose the right supervisor, don't get me wrong. You're going to need to find someone who you can work with in depth for 3 to 4 years. But as a campus university, Warwick also provides you with access to a whole host of expertise outside your immediate departments that is nevertheless aligned to your research area and can take your academic interests in a whole new direction if you start to network. Okay, this is really my last main slide. And then we can get to some questions. Maybe we can start to get to a bit more of what you want to know. Looking here at 10 top tips, just to summarize what we've covered. Firstly, with your university application, this goes right back to that very first slide. It is essential to be passionate about your topic. And this isn't for the academics. This isn't for the chances of success in getting scholarship funding or in terms of getting accepted into the university. This is instead for you to make certain that it is right for you. Don't take a PhD lightly. It is a serious piece of work. In the humanities, it's 80,000 words and hundreds of pages of text of research that will never have been written before. It has to be unique. In the sciences, you do a lot of experimentation, and quite often you get to the final year and then suddenly have to have conclusions. You suddenly have to have a contribution to knowledge to make. Quite challenging. It can be emotionally challenging as well. So I would suggest, when you think about networking, also think about talking to current PhD students. Talk to current academics that you already know. Talk to agents like Inova. Talk to as many people as you can about PhDs to be certain that it is correct for you. When you have made up your mind, and that may be some people listening today, then read the application guidance very carefully. You will see potentially university-wide guidance, which provides a framework. That framework is not absolutely common to every single department. So my advice there is to always look at the specific academic department that you intend to base your research in, and see whether you need to write large amounts of text for a research proposal, whether you need a CV, whether you need references, and how much groundwork you will need to do before you apply. Goes without saying, point 3, complete every element. The easiest way to not be successful is to just chuck something in and don't treat it seriously. So do treat it seriously, like a job application, and you'll stand a better chance of success. Some people won't do that, and they'll be out of the race, they'll be out of the running. You can make sure you don't make those same mistakes. And then going back to Elizabeth's point about the introductory email, we heard from Elizabeth Mailer from psychology. Do be proactive and targeted. It can be tempting, having shortlisted 10 academics, to write to all 10 academics in one email. It won't go down very well because academics, as we've already said, are very busy, and it can look a bit scattergun, to use perhaps an English term there. It looks like you're just firing bullets everywhere. You're not aiming at a target. So do aim at a target. Do try and particularly pinpoint who is the right person. Engage with them as a person. You know, you probably do share their research interests. They've studied similar things to you. They've gone and done their own investigations. It could be to do with health and well-being in older age and psychology. And if that's their particular interest and you share that, talk to them about it, engage their interests, give them questions, things that you think haven't been explored, and test the waters. They may say, well, actually, I think you're right. I haven't actually seen that written before, and I would be interested in reading what you would write about it. You've very largely won the game if they start saying that, because they want you as a PhD doing that research, very likely. So do engage them and their academic interests. Be succinct, both in your email and in any attachments that you append to it. If the academic wants more, they will invite it. So you may find some academics favour personally, and it is a personal preference, larger amounts of text. They want more substance. That's great. You know, if that's what they want, they can advise you on that. But some will just want to see enough to make a decision on whether or not it's worth following up that conversation. Do include enough to make certain that you have made a strong case that you should be considered as one of their PhD students. Where you can, do involve permanent members of staff at an early stage, both at Warwick and also potentially at your current university if you're already studying. And then looking towards funding, look for multiple sources of funding wherever you can, even within one university. There are hundreds, in fact thousands of pages on the Warwick website. There's funding all over the place there. Do talk to colleagues, do talk to myself, to Lorna at Warwick, to Hannah at Warwick as well, to Inova, and they can help you find some of this to make your search that bit easier. Read the awarding criteria thoroughly, and just to reiterate, and I've said it several times, but it is the one point I want you to take home today, please do involve your supervisor before they become your supervisor, even before you apply, wherever possible, get them on board and start having that conversation about what your PhD could be. Ultimately, it's a collaborative enterprise. By year 3 or year 4, you're going to be the expert, and your supervisor is going to be learning from you in a number of areas. And you're starting that research collaboration at the earliest possible stage. Okay, well, thank you for your time today. I don't know if we've got time for questions now, if there are any that have come through on the chat box.
Let me see.
If you're in the chat room at the moment, please do give us your questions. I'd be very happy to take them. And if you're not, if you're watching this perhaps after the session, you might be watching this online, we have a number of emails there that you can contact if you want to find out more about scholarships, if you want to find out more about studying at Warwick.
One of the students is asking if IT is for masters too.
IT?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yes, we have. So this is information technology that we're looking at here. We have computer science. It's been top 2 in the UK for research. In some measures, it's been the UK's #1 research department for computer science. And actually, computing extends across a number of departments. So it will include business school. They've run courses to do with innovation and entrepreneurship using IT systems. We have an academic there who's actually been involved with setting up his own company, so he understands how that works. Same with WMG and their courses on cybersecurity. So there's a GCHQ accredited course there in cybersecurity that runs through all levels. There is access to high-performance computing facilities across a number of science departments. So if you want to do big data work, data science, again, this spans across other areas such as statistics, as well as, of course, computer science, potentially interdisciplinary methodologies. They work in digital areas as well. So it's probably a long answer to your question, but the answer is yes. Yes.
I have actually a question. This student's name is Gustavo, and he says, perfect, I'll send an email because he said 3 things I am completely interested in.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's good to hear, Gustavo. Thank you. Yes, I look forward to your email. Yes.
Perfect. And this question is for me.
Yes, yes.
Because we have several students that they're asking us at the fairs or maybe here. Does the research proposal has some specific length? Or how many pages do you use?
Really good question, yes. And it will depend on the department. So if you're looking at politics or I believe law, some of these departments, you're looking at around about 2,500 words.
Okay.
So it's essay length effectively.
Yes.
Other departments such as classics will ask for 500 words.
Okay.
So much less.
Yes.
Some of them won't ask for anything. They will just ask for an email conversation. We've said already there, you know, treat that seriously, treat that as you would if you were writing a research proposal, draft it before you send it, get someone to check it, that sort of thing. But academics behave in very different ways. Some of them just want that direct one-to-one chat. Some want a much more formal application process where it goes through the right channels.
Yes.
Law actually asks that you applied first to be considered.
Okay.
They were the exception. Most departments don't do that. And some of this advice I'm giving you now online may be 1 or 2 months old. It's always changing. Every day these pages change. So it's always worth revisiting them because your department may revise how they ask for some of these things. So I'm daily having to check this. And there are so many pages, I can't check everything at once. So I try to keep as up to date as possible.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this gives us a really good perspective or how to guide them, because we can say, okay, you need to check directly in the department.
Always check the department. What I would normally say, and it might depend on the department, you know, some cases there's a PDF that they attach that gives you full guidance, multiple pages of guidance on how to write your research proposal.
Yes.
But it can be tucked away on a web page. Many don't have that. What I would tend to do is use headings, break it down, use bullet points within that text to make it as digestible as possible.
Yes.
If you can find one leading research question that guides your whole PhD, that's great. That's ideal. And then to break that down into what could be chapters of your PhD.
Okay.
When I was writing my PhD, my supervisor gave me one piece of advice. She was very actively involved with proofreading everything I put for my scholarship application. She said, always write "I will."
Okay.
So to be deliberative, to be very forceful, to say,
Yes.
with real intent, rather than I might do, I hope to.
Yes.
It
If I
looks,
get it, I would.
yeah, exactly, I would, and these sorts of hedged sorts of phrases. Rather than
Okay.
doing that, be confident when you're
Yes.
writing it.
Oh, perfect. It is a very nice tip.
Yeah.
Yes, a piece of advice. Yes.
I have another question.
Yes.
For many scholarships here in Mexico, you need the conditional offer. Is that the same for scholarships in Warwick?
It does depend on the award. So in some cases, take WBS for example, they will consider your application alongside your university application. So your scholarship and your university application are the same. One comes with the other. So in that case, yes, you can need to be unconditional, and then you get made the offer for scholarship later. But you can apply before you've got that unconditional scholarship. It just won't be announced. Sorry, unconditional offer, yes. It will just be made later. Generally speaking, it will come in that order. And it's also true if you're applying externally. So yes, in the vast majority of cases, you're going to need to apply to the university first. That doesn't mean you can't talk to your academics. You can't draft out everything you need to draft out for your scholarship application and do it in that sort of order. But it does mean, and it's a very good question actually, because when you're looking at your timelines, you need to factor in that universities may take 6 to 8 weeks to process your scholarship application, particularly at busy times of year. Just ahead of the scholarship deadlines, actually, so November time is very busy for us. So the sooner you can apply, the better. It depends on the department, and there may be guidance available specific to each department, but generally speaking, yes.
Yeah, it's important to know for the students that they need to apply at some point.
Yes.
They need to draft their plan of scholarships and everything, but the important part is to apply.
Yes, and we've just created a new graphic to try and explain actually that these things can be synchronous. They can be going side by side. We used to have a very linear model, which I think was slightly deceptive in that you might need to be doing 2 things or even 3 things at once, including applying for the university place first.
The pipeline of
exactly, the pipeline you need to, yes, that's right. Yes. Yes.
Oh, that is good to know. Yes, because sometimes also students ask us when is the right time for me as a PhD student to apply. And we usually say September, but as you say now, November is a busy time for you. Then we must start working with them maybe in August, so they can prepare their research proposal and then send it.
Yes. The earlier the better, in that you'll probably have a gestation period for your research project. So the earlier you can think about it, foment some of these ideas, involve academics, the more elaborate your research proposal can be, the more developed and the more likely to succeed, particularly when it comes to funding, because the funders are looking for impact quite often. They're often looking for different things, and I haven't really mentioned that, but some will be looking for academic impact, some are looking for public engagement, maybe business outcomes, some are looking for the person and that track record, some are less concerned about that and looking more for the idea. If a good idea has come forward, they want that to happen regardless. So it's always worth reading those guidance notes that are often available for research funding. And if you can start, as you said there, in August or September, get going earlier to plan all of this, that definitely helps.
Okay, perfect. That is very good. Okay. So far, we don't have more questions here.
I could just add, while you're looking for questions, that sort of thing, just add that scholarship deadlines depend on the subject you're applying to. So business school have, in previous years, had 2 rounds of scholarship funding in January and again in April. So you could be potentially applying a little bit later. Also in humanities, even into the summer, there are awards available for some departments. So don't worry about January being an absolutely fixed, immovable deadline, because depending on your subject, it might not be. It might be that actually you can apply other times of year.
So you have to keep an eye.
Keep an eye out. If you do apply earlier, there is an advantage because it means you're eligible for more funding. So if you apply before January, even if your academic department is offering a scholarship, you can also secondly apply for the Chancellor's International Scholarship, and you've got 2 chances of getting awarded funding.
Yes. You cannot combine them.
You normally cannot combine them. But some of our awards, if they're partial awards, so they're a contribution towards tuition fees, or they're a part fund towards living costs, they will allow you to join them together. So some departments will, some won't. Some will only offer a little bit of money, but you can add that to the total. That can all help.
That also depends on the department.
It does very much depend on the department, yes.
And you need to be proactive.
You do, yes. So, we're talking about being a researcher.
Yes.
Be a researcher, yes. That's investigate for yourself. Yes.
I think that is key. I will keep that in mind when we are advising students, because sometimes they also ask us, and they come to us, of course, because of the help, but they are actually the ones who know what they want to do.
Yes.
And I can, of course, provide them the link, like search it here. But I don't exactly know what you're looking for. So I'm giving you the way, but you need to do the rest.
Yes.
Yes. So.
And there are lots of, your finger might start aching at some point because there are so many links to keep clicking,
Yes.
one to another,
Yes.
multiple tabs, looking at staff, research areas, scholarships, all of these things.
Yes.
But equip yourself with this knowledge and you'll be in a better position.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So far, these are my questions.
That's great, thank you. Yes, it's
okay.
And as we're talking today, we've got some questions coming through, but at any time, tomorrow or in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, 18 months' time,
Yes.
life circumstances might dictate you need to work for a bit, or you travel for a bit and you come back, and then PhD becomes a viable proposition. Our contact details are always there.
Okay, perfect. Yes, we will share this also with students that were connected, so they can always
Fantastic.
go through the presentation. They can always go back to the doubts that they had. And of course, to the ones who could not attend, we're going to keep this to share it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Any questions, let us know. And for now, we'll log off and wish you a very good evening.